free agency winding down a little bit, perhaps in light of the preseason kicking off. Let's talk about free agency a little bit. It's not over yet. I think we will have to put a final grade on things once preseason actually gets officially rolling on February 6th. But while we've seen some movement, while we've seen some players clearly exercise their free agency and ink new deals with new clubs, there's still some players whose status we are waiting to see if that's going to change. Are some of these players who are remaining on this free agency list in current negotiations with clubs in the league, or maybe they're looking at opportunities outside of the NWSL? Let's maybe run down list of players remaining on this list. We have Jalen Daniels on there, Elizabeth Eddy, Julie Ertz, Tobin Heath, Caitlin Johnson, Shayna Matthews, Tony Presley, Tommy Richardson, Jody Taylor, Michelle Vasconcelos, Kalia Watt? Question mark. Listen, let's go down. Let's go down these. There's a number of players here where even Lisa, when we were fleshing out our outline of content for today, that we even had question marks over because we were like, we thought maybe this player had already announced a new club team, or the club announced a re-signing of some of these players, or we were even curious about a player like Kalia Watt. Her husband, JJ Watt, already announced his retirement from the NFL, and we thought that we were trying to rehash our brains and say like, oh, did Kalia Watt also retire? But we were looking around for some of that, and there's nothing that's really been publicly stated out there at the moment. And then we were also very curious about Elizabeth Eddy, like the Crown contract situation, like going from Gotham and then being traded to the Dash. And is that just something where it's like the contract expired and there weren't actual negotiations occurring? And I think the same thing could be said for maybe like a player like Dummy Richardson. Dummy Richard was a part of a certain amount of players that Gotham ultimately bid farewell to, said, we wish you well, good luck on your next endeavors. That there wasn't perhaps maybe a really meaningful renegotiation to sort of retain those players, that Gotham was going to essentially move on and look to flesh out their roster in other areas. But even for somebody like Katie Johnson, I remember talking with you about it, Lisa, and you were like, hey, didn't she resign with San Diego? And we were like, no, that was actually Mackenzie Doniak. And for Katie Johnson, there's rumors if it's not going to be NWSL, where is it going to be, right? I think that's the next phase of this for the free agency list. If it's not going to be a club with NWSL, what options are these players going to look at moving forward? Katie Johnson is a player that has been linked to Liga MX Femenil for pretty much the majority of her NWSL career. Really, since she was a rookie, was this a player that was ever going to make the jump to Liga MX Femenil? I would argue that those rumors are still prevalent, probably more so today, as she's a player who's listed on this free agency list. But it's always interesting to see like where a player like that can end up, because part of her returning to California was that she was part of the request. She wanted out of Chicago, wanted to play closer to friends and family. So where's her next move go now that San Diego has also sort of appeared to have moved on from negotiating and say like we're fleshing out our roster and moving forward? So where does someone like her end up? So when we're looking at this sort of dozen of names or so remaining on this free agency list, it's far less than the initial 45 that there was to start. When you're looking at these remaining names, for you, Lisa, like who stands out as maybe like one of those names that you're just like, this is still a really good player that could slot into an NWSL side, or who's someone that you're surprised to still see amongst these names?
Yeah, I think that these are good questions because we've heard from clubs that these players were previously at that they were no longer signing them. As you mentioned, Jaylene Daniels with North Carolina, Domi Richardson with Gotham. There's a couple on this list, but there are also a couple that their previous clubs didn't say anything. I think Elizabeth Eddy was the one that I was most like, interesting that Houston didn't release her from my knowledge and what I could see and find, that they didn't say, okay, Elizabeth Eddy, we're going to let you go. Now, Houston had a very good offseason. I think they picked up Diana Ordonez. They've got a lot of depth. They picked up some rookies in the draft. I could see why maybe they don't need a player like Elizabeth Eddy. But when you run down this list, I think a lot of people have circled Julie Ertz on this list. I just don't foresee anything really coming of that as of right now. As a free agent, she can stay a free agent. She doesn't need to sign with anyone. And I just don't think she will. I think Tobin Heath and the talks of her and where she's going, what's happening there, the fact that she has not re-signed with OL Reign makes me firmly believe that she's not staying in Seattle. I imagine she wants to get to California, wants to get a little bit farther south, be a little bit warmer. So that's a player that I think still might have a little bit of shelf life left. And although Tobin Heath has suffered some injuries and she's coming off of a surgery most recently, this is a player that's by no means at the peak of her career. She's maybe nearing the end of her career at this point, but she's still got some life left in her. And you've also got the name of Tobin Heath. And that's a pretty good signing to get if you're a club that's looking to get some fans out to games. You're looking to generate a little bit of talk around your club and chatter. I think that's a player that a club wouldn't mind signing. But you also have to remember that these 12, 11 players are free agents because they've had a lot of experience and a lot of success in the league historically. So they're at the point in their careers where they can negotiate for what they want. And some of that may be happening behind closed doors, right? We don't know if any of these players are very close to signing a contract with a certain team, but they're just working out those couple extra dollars or those couple extra things that this player wants. But they're nearing the end of that, those talks and those negotiations, because, hey, we're on the verge of mandatory preseason to start for these clubs. We've got about 2 weeks left, right? Until a week and a half left until these teams have to have everyone in market and have to be ready to go for preseason. And the clock's ticking for some of these players, I imagine. I think Jodie Taylor is a good grab, right? We've seen what she could do. And you have to be wary that it's a World Cup year. What's going to happen? Who are you going to lose heading into the summer months throughout the NWSL? But those are probably some of the biggest names. The Katie Johnson, as you said, Elizabeth Eddy for me, Jodie Taylor, and I think Tobin Heath. It would behoove someone to pick up her for the name, if anything.
Listen, we're live right now, Lisa. Frankly, I'm just surprised that nothing's dropped as we're doing this episode, because I like to think sometimes that we're a little bit of a catalyst for things. It's like, you know what? Second, third's going live. We should definitely drop a trade or a free agency signing right now as we're going live to react to it.
No better time than the present. Should we be refreshing Twitter here? What's happening?
Yeah, let us know what we're missing in case something is dropped. But we'll keep an eye on it for sure. February 6th, the official cutoff date, preseason kicking off, all players reporting into markets. So I would anticipate that we'll still see some things in the pipeline in the lead up over the next 10 days or so within that. But for now, that's all we've got for you.